It is NFC Championship week. The 49ers set to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Is Brock Purdy ready to make history this week? We're going to talk about that and a bunch more tonight on the Hammer Nayls Show. It is Tuesday night. That means it is time for the Hammer and Nail Show. I am Jack Hammer, and with me, as always, my partner in crime, Jessie Naylor. Jessie, how you doing tonight?
Jack, I'm doing fantastic. It is NFC Championship weekend. We expected to be here. We are here, and I'm ready to talk about it, man.
No, it's awesome. And, before we get into this game against the Eagles, I know a lot of people are going to want to talk about that. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that Eagles game this week. Just want to get your thoughts. I haven't talked to you since the game. We don't argue as much on Twitter these days as we used to. I just kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were of the game from Saturday or Sunday against Dallas.
Yeah, I thought overall it was a good game, entertaining game. Just from a outside perspective, watching it, I was thoroughly entertained. I think it was the game of the weekend, clearly. And I won't say it went like I expected. I thought it'd be higher scoring, but I knew Dallas was going to be tough. Going into it, I said this is the most complete team that the 49ers had faced. And I thought that Dallas was better than last year, as were the 49ers. I think we talked about that last week. So, the fact that Dallas was a formidable foe was not surprising to me whatsoever. And at the same time, though, I don't ever remember feeling nervous in that game. Normally, it's like, I don't know, like I'm ready to yell. I'm just like, I'm amped up. I'm on level 100. And then you have this like emotional release after you win. And I didn't have all that. I felt very calm and confident the whole time through. There was nothing that like no point was like, oh man, they're going to lose or this is a bad deal. Even after the kick return or punt return from Ray that was fumbled, I still felt good then. I don't know. I just felt like the 49ers were in control, but Dallas definitely brought the fight and made it a good little game for sure.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. I don't think there was the nervousness as far as losing that you get. There was definitely, it was definitely a tense game, but it wasn't one in which you're like, man, we're going to lose this thing, or they're going to this game's over with, or anything like that. Never had that feeling. I think the missed extra point really kind of helped that out, though, because instead of it being a 7-3 game, just the fact that it was only a field goal, I think that really kind of changed the complexion of it, like at least the outlook at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Ebicom gets credit for the block. Let's be real, that ball wasn't going to be good anyway. That thing was
so far left. Yeah,
that thing was headed to Redwood City. So if you know how the stadium situated, where Redwood City is, you get the joke. But that was it was an awful kick to begin with. And I think that kind of helped set it up. And then 49ers got a great kicker. He's made four straight in back-to-back games, and it was just it was a tight game that I thought it was going to be tight all the way. I thought there was going to be a little bit more scoring, not much more than there was, because two very good defenses, and just the way that played out, it was watching it back on the film. There were some plays to be made that weren't made, and there were some really good adjustments that the 49ers coaching staff made as that game went on that helped that running game get going. And hey, anytime you can beat the Cowboys, that's good, because I don't know about you, but I'm already sick and tired of listening to their excuses for why they lost.
Yeah, it's funny because I felt like the first half day afterwards or so, there wasn't a lot of chatter, but now it's like every excuse. From Kittle wasn't an eligible receiver to this ref messed up call to that, and I'm like, I don't know. I thought, like, watching the game, that it was a well called, clean game. I didn't really have any complaints on either side, and I am a fan, but I'll also be like, they gifted us one here. They kind of screwed Dallas over there. Like, I'll say those things and admit them, but I don't remember thinking that throughout the game, like, oh, that was an egregious call or they really screwed this one up. I thought it was actually well called. And the one concern I had going into it from a ref standpoint is, is the same head ref from the Super Bowl. I'm like, well, they didn't get any holding calls in that 2019 Super Bowl. What's going to happen here? And it was like the very first snap or one of the early snaps, Bosa, they get a holding call in their favor for Bosa. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this won't be a horrible night as far as refs and no calls here. But overall, I thought it was a clean game. I just think at the end of the day, San Francisco was a better team. And if I'm a Dallas fan, I'm not hanging my head either, because I know that, or I should know that. And I think most sane Dallas Cowboys fans, although I don't know if the word sane and Cowboys fans go together, but most sane Cowboys fans would know that you shouldn't be disappointed. You were beat by the better team. It's just the way that it works sometimes.
It's a great week for television people in Dallas. They're selling a bunch of televisions this week. That's the big thing. They're selling a bunch of them because I think there was a lot of televisions broke around that Dallas Fort Worth area Sunday night, based on what I'm seeing on the social media. But and that the whole thing with the Kittle was covered and all that kind of stuff. I think the other thing is that if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan and you believe that, I think you need to go and find your closest optometrist as soon as possible. It's not even close. It's clear that his hand is off the line of scrimmage. It's clear by where his feet are that it's not even close to being covered up. It's hilarious to me. And I said so last night, and on my film breakdown earlier today, I kind of said the same thing. It's not even close. And what a fantastic play that was, and a lot of good stuff from that one for sure. Let's turn our attention to. Well, before we turn our attention to the game, I did have one other question for you, because I think this became a kind of a thing on social media as well. And it becomes a thing pretty much anytime there's a big game and the 49ers have the ball late in the half. What were your thoughts on the way that Kyle Shanahan managed that end of first half situation?
I thought it was very reminiscent of, ironically, when the 49ers played Philadelphia last year. Very reminiscent. The way that they ran down the clock at the end of the half. I felt like in that drive, Jimmy Garoppolo had bailed out Kyle Shanahan, and they were able to get some points on that drive. And I felt like this was similar. It was interesting. The first two plays, they start out with the run, and then they're running a bunch of clock off. And I'm like, at first I'm thinking, is he like all of a sudden just doesn't trust Purdy in this situation? Like, this is a weird time to all of a sudden just lose all trust in the kid that you've shown the ultimate trust in. And, that wasn't the case, obviously, because they came out and completed a couple passes. It's interesting. Like, on one hand, I was happy that they got the 3, but then the other hand, I'm like, you really could have gone for 7. I mean, you had 20 plus seconds that you just let go. Maybe you could have gotten 7 in that situation, but, ultimately it worked out. And one thing I will say is Shanahan gets it right down to the final second. Like, he knew exactly how much clock to burn in order to get that 3. Now, he definitely had to rely on and trust in Brock Purdy to complete the next couple passes, which ended up happening. But everything was timed out so perfect that, they got 1 second left. They were able to kick the field goal. If that situation happens this week, I would hope they would try to go for a touchdown, because you might need 7. You might need 7. But at the same time, I will say this. While it was happening, I wasn't up in arms about it. I wasn't complaining about it. I didn't think it was that egregious. I understood what he was doing. I understood the flow of the game and what was happening and why, even 3 at that time was huge. So I wasn't mad in the moment. I would just say in this game, I think you should go for 7 if that same situation arises.
Yeah, I hear you. I think they were going for 7, and let me explain myself on it. I know kind of what you're saying. It's one of those things, I think, where they're at. The thought process is we want to get a touchdown. If we don't get a touchdown, we at least want to get into 3. And at the end of the day, the one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want Dallas getting the ball back here, because we want to go in at least tight at 6. So they get the completion to Jennings. That's the one that puts them in field goal range. They're at the 31 right there. I didn't ask this question because I didn't go into the press conference with Shanahan. I went to the locker room instead. But I wonder if, and he probably wouldn't answer this anyway, but I wonder if the play call on the next one, he told Purdy to throw the ball out of bounds, or was he actually telling him to read, and throw it? Because it looked to me like he had Juwan Jennings for a first down on a gain about a 15 yards or so. It would have put him down around the 15-yard line. He had him open on an out route, and he just threw the ball to the cheerleaders. So that was the only thing. If he hits that throw, if he makes the throw to Jennings, who's open on the deep out, then you move on to the next play, which is probably going to be 7 seconds because he's catching the ball going right out of bounds because it's right on the sideline anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The next play, you throw it in the end zone for the touchdown, or you try it, right? And then you go, and if that doesn't happen, you still should have a second to kick a field goal. I think that could have worked out, but again, I don't know if the play call on the one before was, he's looking out there and he doesn't see Jennings is open, and so he just throws it away because that's what Shanahan told him to do in terms of being quick with it, or if Shanahan had told him to throw it away from the beginning. You know what I'm saying? I tend to think that he just missed it and threw it away because that's what he was told to do, because of the way the next play played out, where Shanahan, if you watch it, you've probably seen all 22. That play is hilarious on the L-22. Shanahan looks like the dad of a Pop Warner kid who's making the wrong play. He wants to go out there and grab the kid because he's about ready to screw up, right?
Yeah,
that's
that
what
was, oh my God. I was like, what is he doing right now? Like, just throw the freaking ball away.
Well, and the funny part about it is if you watch from the end zone view of the L-22, you can see Shanahan's about 5 yards onto the field by the time the ball gets out of bounds. It's hilarious. And he definitely wasn't happy about it. That was one of those goofy plays. It's like, what are you, I was with you. What are you doing? Get rid of the ball here, man.
Yeah.
But it all worked out. They get the field goal. And then in the way that works out, you talked about the McLeod fumble on the kickoff return to open up, or the punt return, excuse me, right after in the beginning of the second half. And that helps you, gives you a little bit of cushion because now you're not trailing, you're tied and all that kind of stuff. It all just worked. Everything that could go right went right for the 49ers in the second half. And just it was a dominating performance which I didn't even recognize until somebody hit me yesterday doing my show, and they pointed out, and I wish I'd seen this before or even thought about it, but the 49ers didn't touch the ball until about 8 minutes had gone through the second half by the time the 49ers touched the ball, which makes the fact that they held the ball for over 16 minutes in that second half,
even more impressive.
More impressive. They dominated it after they had that one quick 3-and-out after the long return, but after that they really dominated. The biggest change, people have asked me a lot about the biggest change the 49ers made, and I'll say I think the biggest adjustment they made was they started running the ball at Micah Parsons, which allowed them to cut down the penetration from the backside defensive end on the run game. That to me was the one thing that they did that really changed everything around, because Parsons was just an animal in the first half, chasing stuff down from the backside. And once they started running at him, and DeMarcus Lawrence doesn't have that same speed, so he's not running it down quite the same. And all of a sudden you see them start to pick up 5, 6, 7 yards, on the ground. It was much better in the second half.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad that you noticed that, because that was one of my keys to the game. And then after I think it was the first drive, Parsons had already made his presence known when they were trying to run away from him. And I tweeted out, run at him. Don't run away from him. You've got to run at him. Parsons is an incredible athlete, but he's a little bit light in the pants. And I feel like it's one of those situations where if you run at him repeatedly, you can wear him down quickly and you can take advantage of that situation. And early on, they weren't doing that. And really, they didn't run a whole bunch anyways. It was kind of reminiscent to the week prior, but yeah, you're right. In the second half, they started doing exactly that, and it definitely started working. And it was a big change in that game for sure.
One of the 49ers quality control guys must follow you on Twitter or something. Maybe that's
yeah. He's like, Naylor just tweeted out to run at Parsons. We're gonna do that. Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how that went.
we should try that out a time or two, see if that works.
Yeah.
Before we get too far down this game. Exactly. There you go. Let's change gears. That was a great win against Dallas, but now we're on to Philadelphia, as Bill Belichick famously said one day. Looking ahead to the Eagles and this game coming up on Sunday. First thing I want to talk to you about was this is what your topic is you gave me, as far as, let's take a look at who is more talented, the Eagles roster or the 49ers. And I'll let you kind of get started on that and follow your lead.
God, Jack, this one's tough. So I sent you that topic, and then I started going through it like position for position in my head. Mm-hmm. And I took the Philadelphia Eagles roster, and then I started to try to insert 49ers. And I came away with, if I was building an all-star roster out of these two, offense and defense, I would have 11 total starters that were Eagles and 11 total starters that were 49ers. So I'm like, damn, these rosters are like equally as good. And then, you start to get into the secondary players on a roster, not necessarily like the big dogs, but guys that kind of fill roles for this team. And that was equally as good. You get into the use checks and the Jimmy Wards, and then you flip to the Eagles side, and you've got all the plethora of defensive linemen, and it's incredible. The talent, just the overall talent from both of these teams is absolutely incredible. And I think, for me, the tiebreaker, and I know this doesn't come down to the physical roster, but really the tiebreaker for me is the coaching staff. Sirianni's done a great job. I think Kyle Shanahan is a better schemer than Sirianni and his offensive coordinator. And then also, when I look at the defensive side of the ball, to me, Philadelphia, just player for player and the amount of depth that they can throw out there. I personally, maybe the Giants team, I think it was the 11 Giants? One of those Giants teams that won the Super Bowl that were super deep on the defensive line. This is very reminiscent of that. Outside of them, I can't think of a recent team at all that was nearly as deep as the Philadelphia Eagles are on the defensive line. And yet somehow, even though they've got all that talent and a lot of that talent is up the middle, they really struggle with the run game. And that's really surprising. And there are many games where the Eagles give up way too many points or way too many yards against teams that maybe they shouldn't. And that just comes down to coaching for me, because they have, there is talent all over that roster defensively. It is all over the place. So that was the ultimate tiebreaker for me. And that's I feel a little bit better knowing that the 49ers have a clear edge in a situation here. And I would lean on coaching for that.
Yeah. This is a Eagles team that, they are susceptible to the run. I would like to say that I was going to say, I think some of the amount of running they're giving up is just because of the fact that they're ahead in so many games. But you go back and you look at the trend, and the trend is they give up over 100 yards quite often. And sometimes it's in tight games. And you're talking about the depth on their defensive line. I saw a tweet earlier this week already about, I think there's like 6 or 7 guys along that defensive line that are first-round draft picks taken in the top, I think, 20. And you're talking about that Giants defense. I think you're talking about the one that beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl the year that they were undefeated. I think that's the one you're talking about, where they just
maybe that is the year. Yeah.
That one they did it twice, right? So it was one of those two. And that was a pretty darn good defensive line. And I think you start looking through this game, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I don't know. Let's just look at the quarterbacks for a second. Purdy and Jalen Hurts. And Hurts is a different type of quarterback than Purdy is, obviously, right? He's more of an athletic quarterback in the way that he uses his legs. He's really improved as a thrower, though, this year, which is a big positive for him. It's really kind of changed his game around, and part of the reason why they're doing so well. I saw a tweet. I'm going to just I can't pull it up here, but let me, if I can figure it out how to get to my likes, I'll be able to talk about it. But it was a graphic. I think it's from Fox Sports, and it has the last 7 starts for Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, and it's pretty wild. Their passing yards, 234, pretty close, basically in the 234 and 234.9. Completion percentage, 64 to 66. Pass touchdown to interception ratio, 10 to 3 for 10 and 3 for Hurts, 14 and 2 for Purdy. Total touchdowns overall, 17 for Hurts to 16 for Brock Purdy. Purdy's passer rating is a little bit higher there. I think that a lot of folks, you look at this game and you say the difference in this is the quarterback position. But even then, I don't know if the quarterback position is all that different. I know that, not saying how their players are similar, but the results that they get from that position, I don't think they're that quite as different as people outside of San Francisco might think.
Yeah, I think, I definitely think Purdy can hold his own in that situation. To me, this is going to be the key of the game. And maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like both of these teams would prefer that the other team has to win near the end of the game with the opposing quarterback's right arm. So the 49ers are going to try to force the Eagles to be in a situation where Jalen Hurts has to go win it with his arm. And I think the Eagles are going to try to force that same situation where Brock Purdy is going to have to go win it with his right arm. And that's where it gets interesting, because I think that's probably like the biggest question mark for both of these quarterbacks. Can they do that in this pressure-packed win or go home situation against an elite defense? Can they do that? And maybe we're not going to have to find out for either one. I got a feeling that one of them is going to have to prove that during this game to finish this off. And I'll be curious to see who it is and if they come through on that.
I think there's a point where at some point in every game, we talked about this last year in the playoffs. In order to get to the big game and to win the big game, at some point your quarterback needs to make a play. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the championship game or the Super Bowl, but at some point in that run, your quarterback has to be able to make big plays. And the 49ers haven't had that really the last, they haven't had that. They haven't had their quarterback who can really make that big play in the playoffs to take them over the top. And Purdy showed that a little bit last week. I know he didn't have the big, touchdown throw, but he had a lot of big throws. He had seven of the 9 possessions. He had a throw of over 17 yards or 16 yards or whatever the number was. I think an explosive play is defined as 15 yards or more when it comes to a pass. And he had one on each of the 49ers scoring drives. And the only time he didn't have it was the 3 and outs. Other than that, he had a big completion. So I think there's that positive there. You also have that with Jalen Hurts as well. The dude just throws a tremendous deep ball. So I'm really excited to see this game. I think it's two different styles. The Eagles style of play is what the 49ers want their style to play of be, right? I think. Right. And, that was, I think, their goal. But this is just, I think, going to be just a physical game, and it's going to be which defense plays better and which team doesn't make the big mistake. It's so boring, I think, for a lot of people to have that discussion about the fact that this really comes down to turnovers. But that's where it's going to come down. It's going to be at the end of the day for the 49ers. If they don't turn the ball over more than Philadelphia, I think they win this game.
Yeah, and that, that should give us a vote of confidence because the 49ers really haven't been turning the ball over. They had gone. So did they? If we take all the games that Purdy's played in, we talked about this last week. There was like 4 turnovers and 11 starts or something like that. And then we had the Ray, which isn't on the offense at all, but Ray turned it over this week. So we're talking 5 or 6 turnovers in a 12-game span. That's,
yeah, they have
it's low.
What is it now? 12 game during this period with Purdy here, they have not turned the ball over more than once in any game. Since Purdy took over. They have a few, I think they have 4 or 5 turnovers total, but there's no double. I think that even extends back to the whole
to Jimmy.
To Jimmy as well. Yes, I think you're right. I don't think the 49ers have turned the ball over more than once in a game since this win streak started, which is wild. And they've turned their opponents over multiple times. But yeah, this game's going to come down to all kinds of different things. Turnover is one of them. When we're talking about which roster is better, who has the better players, man, I think if you want to look at the offensive lines for a second, I think people are saying, I'm going to guess that people are saying Philly has a better offensive line. And maybe that has to do with like Mike McGlinchey not being all that help, being the guy. But I don't know. I saw Lane Johnson limping all over the field on Saturday night against the Giants. If he's limping around like that and he's got Nick Bosa across from him, the game might be different. The 49ers offensive line is an interesting one to me. I think they're better than people give them credit for. They really did a good job of figuring things out. The difference in their game from the first half to the second half was drastic. Even the hits, they gave up 2 sacks in the first half. I don't think they had one in the second half. It was just that's a good group, and but like you said, that Eagles defensive line is going to give them a big test. And if they can't get the run game going, I think Purdy's going to could have a rough one just in terms of the pressure that's going to be on them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that I think the blueprint's been laid out as far as what you've got to try to do. Now, nobody's been able to fully execute on it and win the games, but Seattle tried to lay out the blueprint. They just, quite frankly, they didn't have the players to hold down this 49er offense. Not for a full game, anyways. Not for a full 60 minutes. And Dallas took that blueprint, added to it slightly, but then they have a much more talented defense and they were able to do some things. And so I imagine Philly's watching that and going, okay, well, we think we can replicate a lot of these same things. And, for as good as Dallas's defense is, they're better against the run. But if we jam up the box, I feel like we're good there. And we know our secondary is better than Dallas. So let's go mano a mano and see if our secondary can go one-on-one and win these matchups that maybe Dallas couldn't. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. And, I think flipping that, the blueprint's been laid to beat Philly too. Maybe not in the playoffs, but it's been laid. The 49ers know what they need to do. The thing is that's interesting is when you look at Philly on surface level, we'll say things like, well, they can't stop the run. We should be able to have a field day. But reality of the situation is the 49ers run a lot of outside zone out of 21 personnel. And if you look at the Eagles, that is actually their only spot in the run game that they're good against 21 personnel and outside zone. That's where they excel against the run. It's everything else. It's the power runs that they struggle with. Now, the 49ers can implement that for sure, but it is interesting that you take the 49ers' strength and what they prefer to do in the run game out of that same personnel, and that's the only place that the Eagles actually shine defensively against the run.
Yeah, it's wild. And that's why I think I saw somebody pointing that out yesterday. I think it was, and you might have seen the same one. And
Brett
I asked
Coleman.
him, I was like,
Brett Coleman, I think.
Yeah, and I asked him, and I was like, hey, what are they doing against gap scheme? Because, the 49ers are about, 2-to-1 gap to or zone to gap in terms of what they do based off what you see on PFF. And, that's where the 49ers are different. The 49ers are pretty good at a couple of different things, even though they don't run as much with that. They do like to run that stuff a bit, and it's going to make for an interesting chess match. I think there's some things that the 49ers held back on in that game against Dallas. I think there was some of Kyle Shanahan managing the game in terms of managing that game against Dallas while also managing what they're going to be able to do against Philadelphia.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's the case. I just that's a ballsy move there by Shanahan to have that much confidence that you can win the game and while holding something back. Maybe that's the case. Maybe they just felt confident going into that game. And, this is the other interesting thing is now the 49ers are the road team. Now the 49ers are the team that isn't as rested. I know it's only a 1-day difference here, but it is a travel from west to east coast. You lose the 3 hours. And then from Philadelphia standpoint, they play Dallas twice a year. So they have an idea of what they would want to do against Dallas if that was the matchup. You got to imagine that their coaches and staff spent all day Sunday while the 49ers were preparing and playing a game, preparing for the San Francisco 49ers. So they got the one extra day to really pour into the San Francisco 49ers, thinking like, okay, that either that's going to be the matchup, or if it's Dallas, we've got an idea what we want to do. It's been there twice. We'll have to make adjustments or whatever, but we have no idea with San Francisco. So let's spend 24 hours before they play and leading up to this situation, getting ready for them. So, we'll see how those things play out as well. An extra day, no travel. I mean, that plays in the favor of the Eagles here for sure.
I would think, first off, I got to say, listening to Nick Sirianni's press conference was kind of fun. I don't know how much work they actually got done because they were too busy eating Little Caesars pizza during the game. That's what I heard. At least they had some Little Caesars, and their fingers probably got too greasy to be able to studying. But the other thing too, though, is the 49ers are in the same situation in that they knew, just to kind of let you kind of throw it out there, like the 49ers knew Saturday night who their opponent was, and it's not like the coaching staff themselves are the ones that are pouring through that film. They have their analytics department or their other coaches they have guys that are doing that pre-stuff once they know the opponent is. So there was probably some work done on Saturday night too, before the game, just not by the coaching staff, obviously, which is a little different level. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun game. I'm really looking forward to the way this thing plays out. I had a couple super chats want to hit up just real quick, and then we'll get to another topic here on the Eagles and the Niners. Jaguayo comes in. Thank you very much for the super chat. He says, Jack, if the Niners win the coin flip, should they defer? Absolutely. I think he might be asking that question because of how good the Philadelphia offense is, and maybe being worried about them scoring first. Maybe that's why. But yes, if the 49ers win the toss, they should defer. They will defer because that's what they always do. But that's the plan, because then you can try if in that case, if they had won the toss last week and they kicked that field goal to go up 9-6, they would have had to come out in the second half and had a chance to lap them, which is what they really like to try to do. Yeah,
deferring is always the way to go.
Yeah, it's funny because that's more of a new thing. It didn't used to be that way. I remember growing up, it was always you won the toss, everybody get excited because you're going to be on offense first. And
right.
Somewhere in the last 10 years, teams figured out it's better to kick off in the first half and defer that choice to the second. Daryl Granville coming in with another super chat. He's a member of the Toolbox also. Awesome. He says, Philly is weak at cornerback 3 and soft in the middle. What do you think? I'll let you go first.
I mean, linebacker is where you definitely want to pick them apart. That's, and Shanahan's great at that. They have the weapons to do it, and Kittle and CMC. So that gives me a vote of confidence for sure. Cornerback 3, I mean, I would say it's their weakness if you're looking at the secondary, because the secondary is elite. I mean, man, you've got Darius Slay, you got Bradbury, who I think might be a All-Pro this year or second team All-Pro. You got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's a very good safety. I mean, that secondary is a very, very good secondary. They're number 1 against the pass for a reason. They're very dominant in that situation. And so, yeah, I mean, if there's a weakness, it's certainly the linebackers. And I think playing Dallas last week was nice because very similar as far as team structure and where some of their strengths and weaknesses are. I think Philly just amps it up another level over Dallas.
Yeah, and then I got a question for you real quick. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, is that the one? Did he come from the Saints?
Yes.
They
have 2 Gardner-Johnsons. That's one of them is their corner, and the other one is their safety who came from the Saints.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking. That's Chauncey though.
Correct.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's that guy's. He's really good. That's definitely a challenge there. I just want to make sure that I wasn't losing my mind because I thought that's who it was. But you're smarter than me, so I figured I'd ask you. I've seen a lot of people talk about stuff like this, and yeah, they might be weak at they might be weak at linebacker. They might have a weakness at the slot cornerback spot. They might have a weakness, at that second level of their second, third level of their defense. But none of that matters if you don't win at the first level. And that's, I think you already hit on it. That's what concerns me. I'm fine. I think the 49ers will be fine if they can block and stop the run. If they can do that, they're going to win this game. But it doesn't matter if they're weak in the secondary if your quarterback's on his back.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's 17 total players this year that recorded at least 11 sacks. 4 of them are on Philadelphia, and that's not including Fletcher Cox, who is arguably their best player on that defensive line, who had 8 himself. So, I mean, it's crazy how many guys are recording sacks for that team and getting in double digits. I mean, 4 of them to get 11 plus. One of them's Hassan Reddick, who was number 2 behind only Nick Bosa as far as the sack lead this year. They come at you in waves. And when you think about it, and you hear guys like Robert Quinn and Ndamukong Suh, those guys don't even start on this defensive line. They're very, very deep.
Absolutely. And, I think it's interesting. One of the things that's interesting is I know they have a ton of sacks. And I saw the stat the other day. I don't know who I saw it from, but it's basically saying it was something along the lines of they have 70 sacks, but they actually have a lower pressure rate than Dallas. which is interesting. You know, they don't quite get pressure on you as much, but when they do get pressure on you, they're sacking you. I think that's what it's telling me. The other thing that's interesting, you're talking about all the sacks. I'm looking at the number of quarterback hits they have this year. They have 124 hits on opposing quarterbacks. The 49ers have 121. So you know, the sack numbers, the sack totals for the 49ers, they're at 44. You know, which is a really good number usually. What Philadelphia is doing right now is wild, and that number. But you know, this is just one of those matchups. Going with it, other than just kind of throwing some numbers out there to kind of show you some context. So, I know the Eagles are really good, and I mentioned just a minute ago about how that Cowboy game. I think that Cowboy game really was good for the 49ers because it forced them to play at a different speed and a different tempo than they've been playing for about the last month. Somebody over here in the comments section mentioned that as well. The Eagles really haven't been playing at a fast level for a while now. If you go back through their games, you know, they didn't have Jalen Hurts for a couple of weeks, and then they come back and they're playing against the B team for the Giants, and then on top of that, they go against the Giants again, and that game's a blowout at the end of the first half. It's not even close, and man, there's just that kind of makes me want to say that the 49ers have an advantage, and I'm not sure if it makes sense, but
I mean, I think that the 49ers early on had to be in like playoff mode, much like they were last year, you know, where they had to fight and claw. Now, obviously, they were able to clinch a lot earlier than what I think people expected. I don't think anybody expected them to run off 10 straight necessarily to end that season, but there was about a 5-week stretch before they were able to clinch where it was like true playoff feel. Like, we got to win all these. We got to keep winning. We can't lose. We're losing pace here. And even if we are going to make the playoffs, we don't want to be the 7th seed. We want to keep fighting through this. So they've had that extra intensity, and you know, maybe it'll bode well, or maybe they ran out of steam. I don't know. We'll find out. But it's going to be this Jack. I don't know about you, but I've been saying this is one that we turn on NFL films in 15 years. And they're like, yeah, you know, we got the replay of the 2023 NFC Championship, the 49ers versus the Eagles in Philly. This was an instant classic. Like, this has those vibes to me.
There you go. And I like it because you're usually pretty spot on with that stuff. You talk about how styles make fights and how that converts over to football and all those kind of things. I remember you saying that a few times. These are two. This is like you know, I don't know. Yeah, I would like to see a couple of heavyweights is what Jimmy Ward said. I'm trying to figure out a couple of good heavyweight matchup that I've seen in the last 20 years, and I can't really find one. Because I was going to say Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson didn't have any good fights. Those were all
no. I mean, the only one recently was probably the Wilder Fury trilogy, and it was the first fight that was actually the great one. So I feel like maybe this will be like Fury Wilder 1.
Actually, I think, you know, this just hit me. This is actually, you know, since they're playing in Philly, this is kind of like Rocky against Apollo in number 1.
Oh, I like it. Fight? Okay.
Rocky versus Apollo in Rocky 1. Now, that was a battle. Both of those guys were beating the shit out of each other, climbing up the ropes to try to not get knocked out. Remember that? That was a good fight. And
the Philly guy lost. So
hey, I didn't even think, man, I'm getting, I didn't even think about that part of it. Drew wants to know if I'm concerned about the injuries to McCaffrey and Elijah. No, I'm not overly concerned. I think the stuff with McCaffrey, he's been dealing with those for a while. And then Elijah Mitchell, I think he's fine too. He was fine at the end of that game. I think it's just a little bit of tightness that they're dealing with there.
I think everybody's just hurt and sore at this time of year anyways.
Oh yeah. They haven't had a week off for a while. Daryl Granville says, do we run more trapping and power type runs? Thanks. Yeah, that's more of like the gap scheme runs that I'm talking about. The Flyers do that quite a bit anyway. They're a really big counter and power team. Although they do run a lot of outside zone stuff.
Yeah, and I'll be curious because, like I said, the last couple of weeks the 49ers have really come out. They're passing to set up the run. I'm curious to see if they come out and try to just establish the run early in this one, or if they take that same approach. I don't know if I want to pass a whole bunch to start the game while they are fresh. I also wonder if the 49ers go hurry up a little bit because, again, we talked about the strength of that defensive line of Philly, and as much as it is about talent, it's about depth as well. And if you're in a hurry up mode a little bit more, then you're not able to sub out. And so you can wear them down a little bit and take advantage of that. So I'm curious to see the game plan for the 49ers. I know it'll be a good one. I know Shanahan will bring his A game here, but I'm curious to see what the plan is for him.
Yeah, I am too. I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Real quick, 49ers, if they lose this week, does that make the season a disappointment?
Oh, man. These questions are so tough. Because
this is an easy one.
Well, hold on a second. So, like, I want to say, yeah, absolutely. Like, you didn't win a Super Bowl. The team was so talented. But then I just start thinking through the season and the ups and downs, and then, selfishly looking at it and covering the team and all the shows we had and the back and forths and, how great it was. But for the 49ers themselves, yeah, I think it definitely would be a disappointment because, again, one of the things that I said right when the show started, I said, hey, we expected to be here and it's finally here. The 49ers, when they went against Seattle, nobody thought they would lose that game. Mm-hmm. Against Dallas, I think we knew what was, we were all pretty confident. Like, okay, Dallas is good. It's a step up, but the 49ers should win this game. This is the first matchup they've had in these playoffs where I'm like, I don't know. But if you can't, the one time that you truly have to fight a great opponent and you don't come through with all the talent, you traded for CMC midseason, and that acquisition couldn't have been better to this point. You haven't lost since. We talked about the turnovers. A lot of that's for him. And I know that they're on to a third string quarterback, but he's not your normal third string quarterback. He's just not. He's quite frankly been better than Jimmy Garoppolo. For a guy that I liked a lot coming into the draft and even 2 years ago, he's played better than even what I would have expected him to do. And a lot of people think he's the future. He's the franchise. So we got to treat him as such. So, yeah, I would say this would be a disappointment. If this is where it ends, it would be disappointing. Absolutely.
I definitely hear where you're coming from. I think the team would be very disappointed. I think most fans should be disappointed in it. I think you're right. The acquisitions that they made of McCaffrey, that wasn't designed to get to this game. It was to get past this game. Mm-hmm. It was designed to get to the Super Bowl. So I definitely think that there is an amount of frustration if you lose this one. That maybe there wasn't last year. I don't know. It's just different. Plus, they had 2 games at home. It's just a different vibe all around. For me, I'm an old guy. I've seen plenty of Super Bowls, and I want to see them get to the Super Bowl, and I want to see them play as every game possible because that's it's nothing better than watching your own team play, right? I don't care to watch the Bengals.
I gave 2 rips about that Super Bowl last year. I couldn't care less.
Exactly, especially when your team loses the championship game. That makes it even worse. So, I look at this one. Yeah, it's a disappointment if the 49ers lose this game for sure. And everything's there for them. And Norkel Dan with a super chat. You're going to know this one better than me because I'm not the boxing guy, at least not anymore. Wilder versus Fury both got knocked down, and then Fury gets the KO. That's this game. Baldinger says Dallas is way faster than Philly, but Philly has power. Now, I don't know about the boxing part of that, but I will say that if Baldinger is right and that Dallas is way faster and Philly is more about power, that I think could play into the 49ers, fortune when it comes to the offensive side of the ball for the 49ers, because if that's true, maybe they're going to be able to put up some more points than I think.
Yeah, I would say defensively, especially if you're looking at that line, they're faster. Dallas would be faster there. Philly gets a lot of pressure up the middle as well. But when you look at the offense, you flip that around. Dallas was dead in the water. As soon as they lost Pollard, that was it for them. It was the CeeDee Lamb show, and that's all they had. That's not Philly. They come at you with multiple running backs. Those guys have speed. You got A.J. Brown. We know all about A.J. Brown from playing Tennessee last year. They've got Smith, who's been extremely good, second-year wide receiver. And then they've got Jalen Hurts himself. And, that's the difference. It's funny because I feel like they're opposite images of Dallas on both sides of the ball because they've got high-flying offense. They throw a lot of deep passes. Jalen Hurts had, I think, 4 games where he had at least 15 rushing attempts. Only one time has he had less than 5 rushing attempts all year, to where Dak sits around that 3 to 7 range every single week. 7 is where his high would be, and that's a low week for Hurts. So this is a whole different animal. Philly can score in bunches, and that's going to put a lot of stress on our defense, especially the back end for sure. And we'll see. I think our offense can put up points as well. This, even though you've got 2 good defenses, this might turn into a bit of a shootout here.
Yeah, it's going to be. It might. There's some games like that on Philly's. The Philly against Dallas, right? 40 to 34 with their backup quarterback and so on.
Yeah.
Really quick, Caitlin asks, "Do you think the 49ers will be Philly's hardest opponent?" Yeah, I do.
Yes.
Let's switch gears. It's, we know that it's 49ers, Eagles. I got the question for you, though. This is the question that I think the best one for the week. Is Brock Purdy going to make history? Is he ready to make history?
I think he's ready. I definitely think he's ready. I don't I don't know if he's going to, but I don't necessarily, if they don't win, I don't know that it would be Purdy's fault. Let me put it that way, because I think, again, his biggest attribute, the thing that I like most about Brock Purdy, is his mental capacity. I mean, he's bulletproof, man. And again, he's the type of kid that could throw 2 picks on his first 2 drives, and he's still going to be confident for the rest of that game. I think when you look at it and you say, okay, is he ready? I think that comes down to the mental. Like, is he ready for this moment? Is this moment too big for him? A road game, a loud crowd, Super Bowl on the line. Will that befuddle him mentally? And I don't think it will. I don't think it will. And so I think Brock Purdy is fully ready for this moment. I think he's ready to make history. I just don't know if I'm ready to say that they will make history. So that's where I'll leave it.
I agree with you in that I do think he's ready to make history. For me, when you look at the guys who have been in his position, right? There's 4 of them. Sean King with the Buccaneers, Ben Roethlisberger with the Steelers, Joe Flacco with the Ravens, and everybody's favorite quarterback, Mark Sanchez with the Jets, have all been in this same situation. And I don't know about the Sean King one, but I know the other 3, one of the biggest pieces of their performance in their championship games was turnovers. They struggled with turnovers in those games. They had been pretty good maybe up until that point, but they struggled in that championship game in particular. And that's where, I look at Brock Purdy and look what he's doing. And he's played 2 games now, 2 postseason games, hasn't turned the ball over yet. And then you look at and see what he's doing in the second half of those games. Now, say what you want about Seattle, but the 49ers were down at halftime in that game. They were, up by they were tied by the time he finally touched the ball in the second half against Dallas. So 2 tight games in the second half. And he's 16 to 21, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no turnovers. He hasn't turned the ball over yet. And to me, I think he's ready for it. And if he can go out and do that again with everything that's going on with this team, if he doesn't turn the ball over, he's going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I would say on the flip side of that, those other rookie quarterbacks didn't have a plethora of all-pro caliber players on offense and Kyle Shanahan calling plays, so I think that helps him as well. So I think mentally he's ready. I think the weapons around him and the play caller helps him be more ready as well. And so, yeah, I definitely, like I said, if they lose this game, I would be pretty surprised if we come in on post-game shows on Sunday and say, yeah, the 49ers lost, and it's because Purdy really effed this one up, man. He couldn't rise to the occasion. No touchdowns, 2 picks, 220 yards, 55% completion. Like that actually would surprise me if that was the narrative afterwards. So, yeah, I think he's definitely ready.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm just pulling it up. I wrote something about this a while back, but you look at the numbers really quick. Roethlisberger had 3 picks in the loss to New England in 2005. Joe Flacco, 3 picks in a 23-14 loss to the Steelers the following in 2009. And then the following year in 2010, Sanchez, he only had one interception. He was in their loss 30-17 to Peyton Manning. But still, I think, again, if he doesn't turn this ball over, Brock Purdy goes there. And the other thing, the point that you just made that I think is the best one, when I wrote that, I didn't think about it at that time, but Roethlisberger and Flacco and Sanchez, they got to that game on the back of a strong running game and on the back of a very strong defense. They didn't necessarily have the offensive playmaker. The difference between them and where Brock Purdy sits right now is that Brock Purdy has playmakers around him also on offense. He doesn't have those other quarterbacks all had defensive or special teams, defensive-minded coaches. Now you've got a guy that's a offensive guru. I don't want to use the word genius, but an offensive guru in Kyle Shanahan. So I think that's where the difference is here. So it's going to be. I really think that they're going to win this game on Sunday.
Yeah, and King. I mean, I would have to look at the number, but I if I remember those Tampa teams the way I remember those Tampa teams, I don't remember exactly who was on that roster, but I'm gonna say it was probably the usual suspects and Brooks and Sapp and Barber and maybe even Lynch, and I forget who their elite pass rusher was at that time on the outside, but he was a menace. So yeah, they very similar. And then they had Allstott and Work Done and all these other guys. So yeah, I would say that team was also probably built very similarly.
Yeah, it was all those guys. John and all those guys were on that team. They lost the championship game to the Rams. That was the greatest show on turf team.
Oh, okay, yeah.
11-6 was the final. That's the game.
Yeah,
if you remember
now,
where King throws the ball over the middle, and it's I don't remember the receiver. I should, but he catches the ball, but the ball touches the ground. It's one of those where he had the ball in his hand, but the tip of the ball touches the ground, so they called it an incompletion, and they changed the rule that offseason because it was a terrible call.
Was it Keyshawn or Juravicious or?
No, I don't think it was Juravicious. There was another. Maybe it was. Maybe the guy I'm thinking about was on the receiver that I'm thinking about was on the other team, on the Rams, because I think I can't remember who it was. It was the guy for the Rams that caught the touchdown pass, actually, that I was thinking about. But yeah, but again, really strong defense, and they were built around the defense, built around the run. Had a defensive head coach. Again, all four of those guys that have been in this situation. That was a great point you made, Jesse. They didn't have the head coach that's an offensive-minded guy. They didn't have the offensive wizardry part of it down. If I'm getting a little crazy on Kyle Shanahan, you can tell me, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely. And I think, again, also the talent around him. So yeah, this one's different. It's not often that young quarterbacks come into a team that is ready to compete. And I don't know. I heard people say that if Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback, they would have lost last week, and maybe they would have. I'll tell you this: I wouldn't have felt as good about it, and he wouldn't have made the plays that Purdy made, and he would have gotten sacked a lot, and maybe that would have resulted in a loss. But this team would have competed in that game at the very least, and so then you add in Brock Purdy, who's elevating it as well. Then it's just a perfect marriage at the perfect time. Yep. It really is.
I agree. And I know you got to run, but real quick, got a super chat from Gizmo. $2 is a tougher game, Eagles or last year versus the Rams. I'm going to say Eagles.
Yeah, Eagles. But, the 49ers are better. I'll say this. The Eagles are the tougher team. They're better than – I think this year's Eagles are better than last year's Rams. I would take this year's Eagles to beat last year's Rams. However – the 49ers lost that game, and I can see a scenario where the 49ers win this game because the scenario is very different. The 49ers have added CMC. They don't have a quarterback who's doesn't have a whole right arm, basically. And they're in a different situation from a health perspective. Remember, the 49ers had to go on the road all the way through the playoffs, and they had a very early bye week, if I remember correctly. It was like week 5 or something very early last year. They had to win a bunch of games just to get, it was week 6, I think. Week 6 bye. You had to win a bunch of games just to get there. You make it in on the last week. Then you're road warriors throughout the playoffs. This is a very different scenario to where the 49ers are better rested. They're healthier. The team is better. So I don't know if the scenario is worse or the game will be tougher necessarily, but the opponent I think is better.
Yeah, I think they're better. But also, like you're saying, you're talking about all the stuff with the Niners are dealing with. And I think the biggest one is you're better at you're better at safety with both of those guys than you were last year. I think you're better in the slot than you were last year because by this time, K1 Williams was struggling, and your left tackle isn't playing on one leg. So I think there's a lot of things that you also mentioned Christian McCaffrey. There's a lot of reasons to think that this game will turn out differently because I think the Flyers are in a better spot, even if the Eagles are tougher. So thank you for the super chat there. And I know you've got to run, but
I do.
I want to say thank you for tuning in, and everybody make sure you get over to Jesse's channel. You're going on right now, right?
Yeah. Last Second Sports. I'll be on with Sunil.
So get over there, get some So Real Sports talk. I'll talk to you soon, Jesse. Thank you very much. If you want to log off, I'll just go ahead and close it out so you can get over to your show. But
all right, sounds good, brother. I appreciate you, Jack. We'll see you next week.
Okay, take care. All right, there you go, everybody. The Hammer Nayls Show, looking at the game against the Eagles. Yes, the 49ers. I think Brock Purdy is ready to make history. Jesse says the same thing. It's going to be a tough game, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Before I leave, I just want to say one more time, get over to Jesse's channel. All of his content, his information is below in the information. So go ahead and check it out. Hit that like button for me as well. Hit the subscribe button. Those are the two things that do the most for us, especially those likes help to get the channel out there more. And then the subscribe, more people that subscribe, the better. If you have friends and family that are 49er fans, make sure you let them know about it as well. So there you go. 49ers, Eagles coming up. Purdy's going to make history. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll be talking to y'all soon. Take care.